Hi my beauties, welcome to today's video. So if you see, this outfit is the same because I'm trying to film as much videos as possible in the same day, so just disregard that. On my lips I have copper. Make sure to check out our Posh by Chels website, but I wanted to make sure that my introduction wasn't too long because I wanted to get straight into the video since usually I talk a lot. So for today I wanted to share with you guys how I found out I was pregnant with my daughter and why my daughter means so much to me, or like the story of my daughter. So to start off, I have PCOS, so it's like polycystic something syndrome, but for me basically what I shorten it down as is that I have a hormone imbalance. So my periods can be very irregular. Sometimes I will get them, like at one point in time I was getting periods every other week, so I would have a period for like 9 days, get like a 4-day break, and then go right back onto having a period and just basically like constantly bleeding. Or I would have, or I would go a long time with no period, like months, almost even like a year, very long, and I was always that way. So I got my period very late, like, well, later than my other friends. When I was in middle school, all my friends were getting their periods and I still hadn't got mine yet. I think I got mine when I was like going into 8th grade. I don't know how old I was, but I just know like everybody else was getting their period and I was the last one, so I didn't really think too much into it. And then when I got into high school, I started dating my daughter's father freshman year of high school, but prior to that my periods were always irregular, but just in case I wanted to get onto birth control. And I had the Depo, which I was on that I think for like 2 to 3 years, and then I decided to get off of it just because of the way that it was like making me feel and stuff like that. And either way, even on the Depo, my period was literally still the same way. So like from the beginning, when I first ever got my period, it was just never consistent, never a normal cycle. And after I got off of my period, I think honestly maybe I got onto birth control, I think when I was in like 10th grade. I think that's what it was, because then when I got off of it I was already out of high school. So yeah, when I got off of birth control. But either way, when I got off of birth control, my period was still the same way. So it was very inconsistent. I think I got off of my period in 2018 because I graduated 2017, somewhere along those lines. And I didn't get pregnant with my daughter until fall of 2020. So if you can see, like my period was very irregular. Sometimes too I shaved my hair, but I get like little hairs on my chin. So if you ever see me and I'm like going like this, it's because I'm petting my chin hairs. But usually I try to like pluck them, or I'll shave them, remove them. So yeah, so from very early on I had mentioned it to my doctor, or like, what is it, my gynecologist, that I was having very irregular periods. Sometimes I wouldn't get it at all. Obviously they would always like give me a pregnancy test and like do all the tests and stuff like that, and everything came back like perfectly fine. Like I wasn't pregnant, there was nothing, obviously, except for like they did a hormone test and I did get diagnosed with it. But the weird thing is, the doctor's office that I was in, they never like told me that they ran the test. They just, when I went to the OB when I had my daughter, he had told me like, oh, it's in your chart. And I was like, oh, they never like told me they tested me for it, but they had told me that I had a hormone imbalance. I hope I'm making sense. But so from very early on they were just telling me like, oh well, if you ever, I switched doctors like a couple times, but the second one had told me like, if you ever want to have a child, you'll most likely have to go the route of like IVF or some sort of like treatment where it'll help regulate your hormones, because it seems like you're like egg is releasing whenever it feels like it's not on a consistent schedule. So I was like, okay, like whatever. So I was like, okay, I can't get pregnant, so I don't really have to like worry about that. Obviously I was a little like sad because I wanted to have a baby. I didn't know exactly when, but like if they tell you you won't be able to have a baby naturally, and then the prices of like IVF and things like that is very expensive. So I was just like, okay. So yeah, so then with my daughter, it was very weird because I hadn't had my period in like 6 months. And then one day, I was getting into like manifestation, like affirmations, like listening to affirmations as I was like falling to sleep and stuff like that. So prior to that, like I said, my periods were always irregular, so I would always test often, you know, just in case, even though like they told me like you can't get pregnant naturally, but I was still like, girl, like I want to check just in case. And I had taken a test like 2 weeks before, it came back negative. So the tests were like still coming out negative and stuff like that. So I watched a manifestation video, and then I fell, and I was like looking into like my birth chart and things like that, and then I fell asleep. I think I fell asleep like at 1 in the morning or like 3 in the morning. I was struggling to sleep. That's why I put on like the affirmation manifestation video in the background. And then I woke up the next morning, I think at like 7, and then I was like, okay, I should take a test. I don't know why, when I had taken a test like 2 weeks before and like prior to all that stuff, like I had taken 2 tests, so like 2 weeks before and then again, and they had all came out negative. So I was like, oh, that's weird, but something just told me to take a test. So I always had tests in my closet since I always had to test regularly. Well, I didn't have to test, but I just liked to do it. And I had told her dad like, oh, can you go to Dunkin' Donuts and grab me like something to eat, because there was like a Dunkin' Donuts very like close by. So he's like, okay, like whatever. So as soon as he left, I went and I took a test, and it came out positive like right away. And I was like, oh my god. And it was like a funny story. I had told him like, oh, we're going to Walmart, and I picked out like baby stuff, but I said it was like for a friend. And then when I got home, I peed on the test because I wanted him to see one that said like pregnant instead of like the one that shows the 2 lines, because I figured he probably wouldn't be able to tell. But yeah, that's like a story for another day, or probably not even. But so with my daughter, she's very like special, and I always say like she's like a miracle, a blessing, because from the beginning I was told I wouldn't be able to get pregnant, and then I magically got pregnant with her. And then once I was pregnant with her, I ended up finding out that I have a tilted uterus. So it took me a while for her to show, like for me to have a pregnant belly, because she was tilted towards my back, kind of like in my butt area. So I didn't end up showing, I think, until I was like 6 or 7 months. But yeah, so starting with that, I'm very petite, and the doctors had considered her to be like high risk. So they were going based off of like what she was measuring, since I couldn't go based off of a period or anything, because I haven't had a period in like 6 months prior to getting pregnant with her. So I would have like regular doctor appointments, and then she was also considered high risk because I have a very petite frame. So I would always have like appointments every Monday and I think every Thursday. And she ended up being breech, so she was head up in my stomach. So from early on, they had told me like, oh, with your delivery, she might end up coming early, or like we're gonna monitor you very closely because we want to make sure she has like enough air and like space in there, and we want to make sure everything's okay since she is head up. So I was constantly getting monitored. I had stress tests and ultrasounds every week, and I also had like a high risk doctor, and that guy, he was very rude. I only saw him once, and he literally just like walked into the room, and then he was like, oh, you know, you're considered high risk, right? And I was like, yeah. And then he was like, oh, well, there's a high chance that your child, that you're either gonna have a miscarriage or you're gonna have a stillbirth. And then he just like walked out of the room. And the ultrasound rooms are like very, you know, dark, because they usually keep it dark. So I remember I like went to my car and I was like crying and everything. So throughout my whole pregnancy, there was a lot of like odds against her, because she was showing up very small, but I think it's because I'm small. So they were like worried like, oh, maybe her stomach is not developed properly since she's not gaining weight. But also with my pregnancy, I had very bad morning sickness, but it wasn't morning, it was like all day sickness. So for the first 3 months, I was literally throwing up so much constantly, like multiple times throughout the day after I ate anything. And I had lost like 10 or 15 pounds like in the first trimester. So she was small because I literally like could barely eat. But they were also checking like her cord, her umbilical cord, to make sure like the blood and all the stuff, and one ultrasound tech, because remember this, every time that I'm going in I'm getting a different ultrasound tech. So one ultrasound tech had told me like, oh, it looks like there's not enough blood flowing through her umbilical cord, but you're supposed to be back on Monday or like on Thursday in a couple days, so we'll like retest you again when the next person like looks at you, if that makes sense. So I was always very like nervous and very like scared with her, because originally I was told I was never going to be able to get pregnant, and then I get pregnant, and then I'm constantly being told like the odds are against her because she's measuring very small and I'm very small and I'm very petite. And so yeah, overall with my daughter, she's like very special to me, so that's why usually I don't post her, because I feel like she just means so much to me, so I want to keep her as safe as possible. And on the internet, like, it can be a scary place. There's, you know, you never know who's viewing your stuff or who's on the internet. And then there's also like another reason that I will do a story time one day, but I feel like my daughter is the reason why I went on to like my spiritual journey and why I got closer to God. So I feel like she came at like the perfect time in my life, and ever since she came into my life, everything has just been like so much better. Like, it's been like a uphill like type of experience. So yeah, so I'm just very grateful for her. So I feel like I wanted to share that, because sometimes I mention my daughter in my videos, like that I have a daughter, but I never really like go into too much detail. But I did want to share with you guys too, like how I ended up finding out I was pregnant. So besides the pregnancy test, some things that I did like notice that I can kind of remember is my deodorant stopped working, but I didn't think of it. I just started using like men's deodorant because I was like, oh, the women's one is just not strong enough for me. So there was like a lot of different things that at the time I didn't know were signs that you were pregnant, but they are signs that you are pregnant. And I would always be tired, like I could literally take naps like knock out, and I would also be hungry more often than usual. So in general, I say that I eat like a bird because I like pick at things throughout the day and stuff like that. But when I was pregnant, before I knew, like now that I look back and stuff, I could eat, and then literally like 30 minutes later, 25 30 minutes later, I was hungry again, and I wanted to like pick at something else and pick at something else. And then literally once I found out I was pregnant, it felt like the morning sickness just came in, and then I was just not able to like eat because I was literally throwing up everything. Like, it wasn't smells that bothered me. My boobs were very sore, like my boobs, my nipples, they do get darker and bigger, and so do your breasts, and they would literally feel like rocks. Like, I literally felt like I had breast implants and I had milk very early on, like I was leaking and stuff like that. But also when you get pregnant, well, this is just speaking on my experience, but my gums were very sensitive, like they would bleed all the time, especially when I was brushing them, and my mouth, like my saliva would taste kind of like metallic, if that makes sense. It had like a weird taste, my saliva, and I would get excessive saliva. So my mouth, like I literally had like a cup, like I would go to work and have a cup, and I would just be spitting like constantly into the cup because of how much excessive saliva that I had. And the saliva, I feel like since it had the metallic taste and all that stuff, it changed the way that certain foods tasted as well. So that's what would make me throw up, like the taste of the food. And also just literally anything that I would eat, like rice, pasta, literally anything, strawberries, I would eat it and it would go down, and I would think I was fine, and then I would literally have to run to the bathroom like right after and just throw everything up. So yeah, so I had a very interesting pregnancy. So with my pregnancy, I had it like a little private because I had a lot going on in the background. So I wanted to keep it to myself, because I'm the type of person that if I'm going through things, I don't announce it to everyone. I like to just like keep it to myself and just see it through, like see how things go, because I feel like if I was to announce like, oh, I'm having like my pregnancy is high risk and stuff like that, then I feel like that's probably something that's all that people would talk about. You know, the odd thing is like when things are going difficult in your life, people will share it, but if things are going good in your life, people don't usually share it. Like, it doesn't become a topic of discussion. So I just didn't want a lot of people talking about that, because it was like a very hard time for me. So I wanted to just keep it to myself, and that way I could just go with the flow and try to just enjoy my pregnancy as much as possible. Because literally, once people find out you're pregnant, you will get messages from anyone and everyone. People will try to be all up in your business, and obviously there's some people that are doing it because they like care about you, like your well-being, they're excited for you. But then there's also people that do it out of like malintentions, or just because they want to be in your business. So I tried as much as possible to like protect my energy and the energy of my daughter, because at the end of the day, when you're pregnant, it's like your baby feels your emotions and your things like that as well. So I'm pretty sure she felt all my nervousness and all that stuff. But I did want to just share that with you guys. And yeah, so I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Bye, my beauties.